Good morning to all of our participants. Thank you so much for joining us today. It's my great pleasure to welcome you to this webinar on Resource for Analysts. For those of you not familiar with IRENA, we are an intergovernmental agency mandated by countries around the world to promote the widespread and sustainable use of all forms of renewable energy. IRENA has 140 members and 32 states in the process of becoming members. In January 2015, IRENA launched an online knowledge platform called Resource, which enables public and free access to all of IRENA's renewable energy information and data. By linking to IRENA's vast knowledge base, Resource provides relevant, reliable, and timely information on renewable energy market statistics, potentials, policy, finance, technology costs and benefits, innovations, as well as information on education, among others. Today's webinar will demonstrate how you can find renewable energy data through Resource, research country-specific details such as renewable energy policies and potentials, and search through IRENA's database for the latest publications in your field of interest. Before we begin, we would like to share a quick note that IRENA does not endorse or recommend specific products or services shared within its webinar series. Information in this webinar is featured in the IRENA Renewable Energy Learning Partnership Database as just one of many best practice case studies. If you are interested in finding out about future webinars offered through the IRENA webinar series, please visit the IRENA Renewable Energy Learning Partnership website and sign up for our weekly newsletter to receive updates on courses, webinars, and internship opportunities in the sector. For today's webinar, we have two options for listening in. You may connect by computer by selecting mic and speakers, or by phone by selecting the telephone option in the right-hand panel on your screen. If you should face any technical difficulties during the webinar, please contact the GoToWebinar help desk at the number provided on your screen. I would like to encourage everyone to participate in today's session by asking questions. To do so, simply select the questions panel in the right-hand bar and enter your question with a note of who you would like the question directed to. We will be collecting questions throughout the webinar. If you would like to watch this webinar again or to share it with a friend, we will have a full recording available on the IRELP website as well as on the IRENA YouTube channel. If we are not able to answer all of your questions during today's session and you wish to connect with our panelists, I encourage you to visit the IRENA community and join the resource discussion, which you can find under featured topics. So without further ado, I would like to introduce our panelists for today's session. Our first speaker will be my colleague, Dr. Nicolas Fichot, who is a program officer at IRENA. Nicolas coordinates the Global Atlas for Renewable Energy and participates in the development of Resource, the IRENA Renewable Energy Knowledge Platform. Prior to IRENA, Nicolas worked for the European Wind Energy Association as the head of policy analysis and the Secretary General of the European Wind Technology Platform. And second, we'll be hearing from my colleague Stephanie Wackend, who is an Associate Program Officer for Data and Information at IRENA. Since 2014, she has been working in IRENA's Knowledge Unit, where she focuses on data and information management. Stephanie's activities include the Knowledge Gateway, data dissemination, and statistical analysis. Previously, she had worked for the Canadian-German Chamber of Industry and Commerce in Montreal, Canada, where she was Managing Director of the Regional Office for Quebec and Eastern Canada. I hope you all enjoy the webinar. With that, I would like to hand the floor to our first speaker, Nicolas.
Thank you very much, Stephanie, and welcome to everyone to this webinar today. I will make a short introduction on the genesis of Resource and why IRENA has delivered this platform. We believe that this platform will bring a very valuable service to the whole renewable energy community and beyond, and I will explain you shortly why we think this is the case. The renewable energy sector that we are seeing today is relatively new. Only 15 years ago we had a quite stable market with 850 gigawatts. And now in terms of installed capacity, we are above 1.6 terawatt, and we saw this doubling happening only in the last 13, 14, 15 years. The technologies we are talking about when we speak about renewable energy broadly, this is a bunch of technologies that are extremely diverse with very different levels of maturity, and every single subsector is facing very intense research and development activity. For example, when you see a wind turbine today, it's completely different from the device it was only 10 years ago, 15 years ago, and now with modern wind turbines, you can even provide services to the grid. to restart your grid or to maintain the frequency, for example. That's the kind of thing that was completely impossible only 10 years ago. These technology development that we see are driven by a very strong political desire to secure affordable power that is reliable and with modern energy services without harming health of the citizens nor the environment. And in addition, the governments now focus not only on cost efficiency, but they also factor socioeconomic benefits, on top of which you find the jobs and job creation, which is on top of the political agenda. And as a result of both the policy pull and the technology push that we see, the costs of renewable energy are falling down, and renewable energy is now competitive in most places with different solutions with the traditional solutions that you can find. Last year, almost a quarter of the world's electricity was produced by renewable energy, and for the last few years we saw new renewable energy capacity overtaking gas, for example. And this was a new fact that came only a few years ago. That was unexpected even from the renewable energy sector. Renewable energy is now a $250 billion market, and there are ups and downs every year depending on the economic situation, but this investment flow is growing, and we see even publication talking in the future of $1 trillion annual investment in renewable energy, a very promising sector. At ARENA, we have charted the way on how renewable energy share can double by 2030. We showed and demonstrated, documented that this is feasible, and this makes economic sense. And now in ARENA, we are working with 27 countries in order to develop national scenarios in order to implement this vision that is pushed by Sustainable Energy Forum. We see that there will be an increasing use of renewable energy solutions for power and for heat, very clearly, but also for cooling application or desalination and transport. From year to year, we also see that the markets are extremely dynamic. The technology are changing, but the champions of a market, a specific year for a specific technology, can shift rapidly to another place for another technology. And there is a well-known case of the renewal of the tax credit in the US that is affecting or has an influence on the global wind power market. But also more recently, the change in Chile in the energy policy has proven to be very effective, and last year we saw a surge in solar installation and wind installation in the country with a market growth that is over 100%. So we are talking about a very diverse market with a large number of technologies. We see shifts in the different markets and in the different countries. We see a growth in investment flows, and what the question comes to know where we are in terms of monitoring this market and what kind of evidence we can bring to document this growth and where it is happening. Only 3-4 years ago, it was very difficult to get any idea on the number of jobs that was creating in the renewable energy sector. What are the costs? How are these costs evolving? Where is the potential for growth? What are the potentials? What are the education opportunities and what are the challenges? The global statistics are collected, were collected with annually with a 2 years delay, for example. So in the numbers that you could find, you had a gap that was not reflecting the dynamic of the market or the growth of the technologies in the different sub-segments. As an analyst, if I were to find any relevant information, I would have to go through a very vast amount of literature, mostly on paper, and also I would have to confront many sources in order to get any idea or any grasp on how renewable energy is growing, where, which technologies, which costs. And this created a lack of clarity, and this lack of clarity did not benefit the sector, since it has allowed misconception to be carried over time, and you can still find colleagues, even from the energy field, that are surprised by the enormous capabilities offered by renewable energy solutions for grid-connected application, large scale, but also for small-scale application or for powering communities that are far from the grid, for example. And you still have this discussion on how far can renewable energy contribute not only to the global energy mix, but also locally to the national power supply and for communities. So since its creation, ARENA has worked on analyzing the sector, gathering evidence, documenting case studies to show the potential of renewable energy, and where it's going. And today with Resource, what we have done is that we have concentrated all this information that has been compiled by ARENA in one place where you can search, find relevant information, updated information, and we hope it can bring much more clarity on where renewable energy are today and how they will grow in the future. So for the time being, the resource that you see is concentrating information from ARENA from 12 parallel initiatives that are operating international consortium. It gathers a lot of information. We compile this information, we analyze it, we proof check it, we assess the data quality, and then we make it available for resource. And in the future, what we would like to do is not only to show ARENA compiled information, but information that is being compiled by partner organizations like the IEA or REN21, for example, for naming a couple of them. So without further ado, I will give the floor to my colleague Stephanie, and she's been the main architect behind Resource, and she will be driving you through the different functionalities of the platform. Stephanie, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Nicolas, also for that very comprehensive and good introduction to the background of Resource, our knowledge gateway platform. Before we start to walk through the platform itself, and I give you a more technical overview and also on the functionality of Resource, just a short information note on the development of Resource itself. So Resource was developed over the course of 2014, launched at our ARENA General Assembly in January 2015, but as Nicolas mentioned before, draws on all the work from our different initiatives from the past 4 to 5 years that ARENA has conducted. So if you go and look at the platform itself, you will see the different functionalities that Resource offers to users. The first functionality is a simple search. Then you have another functionality that is the country profiles, and the last functionality or dimension of Resource, that is the data and statistics component, so the hard data. So we'll start by the search function of Resource itself. So you will see here you can either click on the renewable energy section, so we have the principal 6 technologies here represented, but if that is not specific enough for you, you can type also in any query that comes to your mind. For instance, if we're interested in, and Nicolas mentioned before, the solar PV development in the last 13 years, if we look at the solar PV knowledge component within ARENA, we will see that we have quite extensive knowledge and publications gathered in solar PV. There's also another abbreviation that for solar PV we can type in solar photovoltaic, because some users might not be used to either the solar PV acronym or solar photovoltaic acronym, so we have both solutions available. So here you will see, and I'll walk you through the site itself, you'll see all the results within ARENA that are related to solar photovoltaics. They draw from our different initiatives, so you can then filter down these results either again by technology, by countries, or by the different sources that we call also the different ARENA initiatives. You will also be able to filter by years. As ARENA is quite a young organization, and we also will grow in knowledge over the next years. We have a yearly filter installed that shows you, for instance, all the publications related or content related to solar PV that ARENA released in 2014. You can type in any technology, so if we, for instance, go from solar PV to another very interesting sub-technology of bioenergy, namely biomass, where ARENA is doing a lot of work, especially in Africa or in the REMAP 2030 scenarios or options, as we call them. You can see that specifically a lot of REMAP results will show. But if you look also at the pagination of the tool itself, you will see that we obviously have some content also related to biomass and the renewables readiness assessments. So that are the country-specific assessments that IRENA is conducting in one of the units related to market readiness, but also socioeconomic benefits of renewables in a specific country. So you see here 2 examples of Niger and Peru. You will not only find content related to technologies within resource, but also related concept or initiatives. As you might know, IRENA is working a lot with Pacific Islands in the moment also to combat climate change and find solutions for remote islands when it comes to, for instance, also off-grid. So one of our initiatives here at IRENA is related to specific lighthouses. This is how we call the initiative. And then if we type in that specific query in resource, you will find all the content and all the publications that we have related to these different islands. So you see here that we have content that relate to specific countries themselves. We have a second component in resource that are the different country profiles with a renewable energy focus for the world. So we mentioned here, and if you look at, for instance, the example of Fiji, we can also type in Fiji in the query, and then you will see as a first result appearing the country profile page of Fiji itself. So if you click on the link itself, it will basically direct you to the country profile page of Fiji, which is quite a comprehensive page that we put together, showing you not only a map, but also the evolution of energy capacity in the country. You will have a news and event section, and then in the main, let's say, core of the page, you will have different thematic functionalities related to the country itself. So the first tab is related to resource assessment. So we will see that through our Global Atlas initiative, we made a map for Pacific countries. You will have information on the energy sector and the capacity through our publication on island tourism. You can also find information on the policy and legal framework, which is also with the partnership that we have with the IEA-IRENA Joint Policies and Measures database, very comprehensive when it comes to the different policies Fiji has put in place related to renewable energy. And you have further tabs related to finance, market and investment, and as we mentioned before, the REMAP 2030 scenarios. So you have all the countries in the world that are UN member states represented in the country profiles in resource. We can also look, and my colleague Nicola mentioned before the case of Chile, for instance, where again you will have and find comprehensive maps related to resource assessments, to the installed capacity. So you will see here that Chile from 2004 to 2013 has installed quite significantly bioenergy, solar and wind capacities, which we can look further at once we come to the data and statistics page. You will also see here again, and we talked about it briefly, the policy and legal framework. Nicola mentioned before a specific law, and he was mentioning the non-conventional renewable energy law that was amended at the end of 2013 to promote further use of renewable energy deployment in the country. To draw from one country to another, you can simply click also on the map. You have two different options. Either you click on the country in the map itself, or here we also have a list of countries that we have in resource itself. So we can also look at one of the renewable energy leaders of the last 2 or 3 years, namely China. You'll see that we have also been able to gather quite comprehensive news on the country itself. Again, here for some countries, IRENA has obviously gathered a lot more knowledge already than in others. For some countries such as China, you have also a lot more content than, for example, for Fiji, like we saw before. So it really depends on the country and the specificities of the countries itself. So that's let's say the second functionality of resource, the different country profiles itself. When we constructed resource and also the feedback that we received from the launch, one of the main, let's say, interesting parts is definitely the data and statistics section, and we got quite a lot of feedback also related to this. So as you can see now, we are on the data page itself. For the data section, we have so far 4 different topics available, which is namely a capacity dashboard, so this is how we call it, a renewable energy education dashboard, an employment dashboard, and a costing dashboard that draws specifically on levelized cost of electricity. So I will walk you first through the renewable power capacity dashboard itself. As you can see, when you look at the landing page of that specific section in resource itself, you have already quite an extensive number set of 2014 data available. So for instance, for solar photovoltaic, you can select different countries through the drop down and see also how the market developed in solar PV over the last 14 years. So we talked about Chile before, for instance, so we can take the example of Chile. You see that there was quite an impressive installation that was made in 2014. You can look at and see the level of detail either by cumulative capacity or by net additions. And this is available for each technology that we already have logged into for 2014 data. For instance, if you go to the example of Canada, you'll see that also 2014 here was quite an extensive growth year. As I mentioned before, we do not have all the 2014 data for all technologies, for all the countries available yet. We are logging them in as they come, as they are made available to us. When it comes to data itself and capacity data more particularly, we're working with our member states but also with national statistical offices to make sure that the data sets that we have are comprehensive and also official statistics. So if you want a data set, or if you're interested in data sets and comparisons, for instance, by regions or by countries, and here I moved from the first tab to the second tab, we have been able to log in quite comprehensively and make distinctions between regions too. So for instance, you can filter here by regions, for example. Then you can also choose any country that you're interested in. Let's choose, for instance, the Republic of Korea. And then you will see here, by hovering the mouse over the different technologies, the specific data that lies behind it. We have also configured the data dashboard to include the different funky and nice animations. So you'll see here you can switch from a simple bar chart to a line chart. Also possible is to basically filter down by different technologies. So often we have been asked to also exclude, for instance, especially large hydropower from the equation. So this is also possible with this, let's say, multifunctional graph dimensions that we have built. I'm not going to go through all the tabs, but perhaps one last visualization that might be also of interest to you is the country rankings itself. You can filter by technology leaders in either the regions or the countries. So here you'll see the top 10 countries for installed renewable power capacity. You can also filter this by technology. So for instance, if we go on solar energy, you'll find quite a comprehensive list here with Germany as #1. This will probably change once we log in also to 2014 data. But you can also basically, if you go back and click on all the technologies again, you can also filter this by regions, such as, for instance, for the Middle East. So you'll see here a quite interesting list of top 10 countries in the Middle East, with Iran on first place. Good. So that was it for the capacity dashboard. Let me move on to the education dashboard itself. So for education, our data derives from the IRELP initiative by IRENA, so the Renewable Energy Learning Partnership, where we include and gather different data sets related to courses, but also internships, etc., which was also mentioned in the introduction. So if you look at the renewable energy courses offered by region, no big surprise here. You'll see that with over 40%, Europe ranks as #1, followed by North America. The resource tool offers also quite an interesting analytical point of view when it comes to renewable energy courses offered by topic. So multi-technology here predominantly with 55%. These are renewable energy courses that don't focus on a specific technology but on multiple technologies, as the title already says, followed by solar energy and then by wind energy. You can also filter by country itself. So for instance, we have seen that specifically in China or also in various European countries such as Germany, renewable energy education has become a priority over the last 10 years. So if you look at the case of Germany, for instance, you will see that similar to the overview that we saw before, the multi-technology component leads, followed by solar energy, and then here in this case geothermal, and only then wind energy. So that comes also, and this leads me to the other socioeconomic dashboard that we have integrated into resource, the employment dashboard itself. And so here it becomes also quite interesting for analysts to see which are the gaps to close when it comes to education, and then after that to employment. So in the REMAP 2030 scenario, we're speaking of a scenario where we'll have or we will need over 60 million people employed in the renewable energy sector to fulfill the world need in renewable energy deployment. Currently, we are at 6.5 million jobs in 2013, which was released by the numbers that we had gathered in our report last year. We're currently working on the 2014 numbers that will be released in May, so in a month. So one analytical point that I also wanted to show you, and that's something that you can do in your respective countries or in the countries of interest that you have, is remember that in the education dashboard, when we looked at Germany, for instance, you saw that Germany offers the most courses in multi-technology, followed by solar PV, geothermal, and then wind. You will see, for instance, that Germany employs much more people in the wind sector than actually in the solar PV sector, so over 100% more, and geothermal jobs are only at 17.3 thousand. So this is a little bit an overview on the employment dashboard itself. The last dashboard that we feature in resource is a dashboard related to costs of renewable energy. more specifically the levelized cost of electricity. We have made available to you the breakdown by the different regions when it comes to the technologies that we have available. So here again, if you hover your mouse over the different data points, you will see that, for instance, for Latin America, the cost for solar PV is at 0.312 US dollar per kilowatt hour to a minimum of 0.113 US dollar per kilowatt hour with a range of 0.145. So you'll see it's quite specific data sets with three decimals after the dot. We just wanted to make sure that you have all the data that we already have also in-house available to you. You can also filter by different technologies, as I mentioned before. So, for instance, for onshore wind energy, you will have different levelized cost of electricity, so averages, minimum, and maximums. Again, for the Middle East here, you'll see that the costs are a little bit lower, or for Latin America too, than in solar PV. There's a different view that you can also interchange depending on what your needs are. So for instance, for the levelized cost of electricity in North America, you see no big surprise here. Hydropower as the cheapest technology, followed by hydropower small. Let's look at a different region. So let's look at Latin America, since we looked at Latin America before too. You'll see here again hydropower as the cheapest or the most economic solution for renewable energy deployment, followed closely by solid biomass, onshore wind, and solar photovoltaic. And then we have a small amount of geothermal installed in Latin America, which we have also included. So for more comprehensive charts and that are also featured in our publication, we have also made available an image gallery where you can download or view different charts and graphs that we have within our publications. So this is right here on the right section of the page. So this would close the technical presentation of resource from my end. If you have any questions, please let us know. As mentioned in the introduction also by Nicola to resource, we are in the moment complementing our data sets internally, but also with trusted external sources such as with the IEA and REN 21. And this is a dynamic tool, and we hope that we will be able to make a lot more information also available in the future to you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Stephanie, and to Nicola for your presentations. So now we will be opening the floor for questions. So we have many questions coming in now, and please continue to ask them as we start to answer. So our first question was coming from Lyabov, and I'll just answer this one. They were wondering if a recording of this session will be made available, and yes, and it will be circulated to everyone who is registered for this webinar, and will be on both the IRELP website and the IRENA YouTube channel. We'll also be circulating a questionnaire about resource in that email as well, so we'd appreciate it if you could give us some feedback on your initial experiences with resource. So our next question is for Nicola. We have Mafuja asking if we could provide a brief explanation of the REMAP 2030 initiative taken on by IRENA.
Thank you very much. So the REMAP initiative is an initiative that is coordinated by your colleagues in the Technical Center in Bonn. This is a very large initiative that is involving many of the IRENA member countries. The purpose of this initiative is a response to sustainable energy for all, where in Sustainable Energy for All there are three goals. One is on energy efficiency, one is on electricity energy access, and one is on doubling the share of renewable energy by 2030. And we were tasked by the United Nations Secretary General to work on such a scenario, to analyze what it would mean to transform the global energy mix, which technology could supply the necessary energy, what would be the cost implications, what would be the job implications. And we came up with such publication at the end of last year. So this is a book that you can download from, of course, from a resource and also from the REMAP website, which is very detailed and very good source of information. What you see in resource here are the charts and the data sets that are that were collected during the analysis of resource. Now there is of REMAP, sorry. And then now there is a follow-up of the global scenario exercise, REMAP, that is to work with 27 countries and to look more into detail into what a doubling of renewable energy globally would mean for these individual countries. So depending on the countries, we are not necessarily talking about doubling the share of renewable energy for each country. For some countries it can be more, for some countries it can be a little bit less. Very recently there has been the release of the UAE scenario for United Arab Emirates, for example. Before there was an analysis that was done for China with the Chinese government, and this is something that is used in China also to work on the 5-year plan, for example. So it's a very good guidance exercise for countries to see how far they could go in renewable energy, can they achieve to contribute significantly to doubling the share of renewable energy, and how and what are the implications for their economies.
Thank you very much, Nicolas. So our next question is for Stephanie, and we also have our colleague Olivier here joining us from the statistics team. So maybe he can share his opinion on this as well. So we have Jesper wondering how often new country data is added to the library on resource, and if we go systematically through a list of countries to be added by each quarter or month. So Stephanie, okay. The data that we display in resource is updated as soon as we have new and current data available to us. So it's a continuous and constant update. It's not an update that happens once a year or once a month in a moment. So as soon as we have, let's say, a certain amount of new data that we also see a value and for external users, we make that available immediately. There was another question that I saw, and that might also be answered here at this point, is how do we gather this data? As I mentioned in the capacity, or when I was going through the capacity dashboard itself, we work with our IRENA questionnaire that we send to national statistical offices to gather country-specific data, but we also have partnerships with different regional organizations when it comes to data collection itself. And when it comes to, let's say, recent data, so in this case 2014 data, we have been able to make close partnerships not only with the statistical offices but also with the national industry associations or international industry associations itself too. Okay, thank you very much, Stephanie. So our next question is about extracting images from resource. So we have someone wondering if it's possible to extract, for example, charts from the data dashboard to be used in a presentation or publication. So Steph, maybe you can answer this as well.
Stephanie, would it be possible to show it live? That then this would be probably much easier. So in the data dashboard itself, and then here still on the LCOE dashboard, you'll see that below there is a download function where you can either download the graphs or charts in PDF or in image itself. You can also share this graph if you want by social media, that you're even able to basically link to these specific graphs or these specific dashboards on your own websites or your own work that you do. So resource is really, let's say, an open data concept where we don't restrict the data use as such, but we would, and that's the goal of resource itself, make the most data available on renewable energy as possible.
Thank you very much, Stephanie. So our next question, maybe I can answer because it's regarding the education data, and I'm working on the IRENA Renewable Energy Learning Partnership. So we had Matisse wondering how the course data is collected and whether these are IRENA courses or university courses. The answer is that there are a wide variety of courses. They're not just IRENA, but some of them do include IRENA courses. But it could be anything from a short-term, say, vocational training course that might last 2 to 3 days, everything to bachelor's, master's, and PhD programs. And these are all over the world. And they're collected by our team through desk research and validated by IRENA, and also collected through our partner organizations. So we work with many different networks, regional centers, industry associations to gather information on this education and training available worldwide. So our next question comes from Katerina, who is wondering if there are plans to ever include details on gender within the employment data available on resource. So that question will go to Nicolas.
So this would be very helpful because in the renewable energy sector, this is something that is missing. It's an element that is missing. But it's very challenging to do that. So the reason is that in many cases, in many countries, you don't really have accounting of the number of workers working in the renewable energy sector. Even sometimes at company level, for large utilities or large companies, it's difficult to have the exact count of how many people are working on a specific topic linked to renewable energy. So most people are working in the energy sector, but it's difficult to know if they are working in renewable energy or on other technologies. So the way that most job estimates are done today is by using a proxy. The proxy you are using is the installed capacity in a given market with different conditions, and then you try to estimate the sort of employment factor to convert this number of megawatts on the ground and the number of megawatts that are running and operational into jobs and number of people that are working on installation or maintenance. And if you want to have a global estimate, you need to have a sort of unified methodology. That's why it's very challenging to collect data bottom up from individual countries. What you can do is to compare your proxies that you are using with the actual data coming from some sources in order to know if your methodology is accurate or not, and to have a sort of error analysis. But we are not counting individual people per se. So that's why it's even more challenging to have an idea of if these persons are men or women in the industry at the moment, because the counting of renewable energy people is not done systematically nor accurately. That's why it is challenging. But however, this is an issue that is definitely of very high interest, and this is an issue that is very often discussed: the lack of involvement of women in renewable energy sector or in the energy sector in general also.
Thank you, Nicolas. So our next question is coming from Dirk, who is wondering why there's no data on energy efficiency when it comes to jobs, but we do see this field appearing under education. So Stephanie, maybe you can.
Okay. So for the question is if we don't have a data dashboard for energy efficiency, but we have a subcomponent in the education dashboard on energy efficiency itself. The reason is quite simple, that our IREL-based database, so renewable energy and education and learning database, also includes energy efficiency courses, since, for instance, we have some technologies such as heat pumps that can either fall under renewable energy or energy efficiency. And this is like a good example for this. However, IRENA focuses most of the data sets on renewable energy, and this will remain this way except when there is cross-linkages similar to what I just mentioned between these two subjects.
Great, thank you. So our next question is coming from Barry, who is wondering specifically about the data on the levelized cost of electricity, or LCOE. So he's wondering where IRENA collects this data from. So maybe Nicola, you can mention something.
Yes, so it's a very good example. So this is how IRENA is working. IRENA is working in particular with partnerships. So the data that you see in resource is collected through very large international consortia that include our member states and also universities and also consultancy. So in particular for the costing, all the data are coming from the Costing Alliance, which is a very large undertaking of IRENA that involves member states and also organizations that are collecting this data and putting this data together so that we can have an estimate of the cost on a confidential basis. We even have private companies that are sharing costs with this Costing Alliance so that the data that we provide can be the most accurate as possible and also the most relevant as possible. So if you go to you find the information there on resource. If you want more detail, there is a website, irena.org/costing, that is dedicated to providing detail on the initiative, where the data comes from, and how what is the methodology for crunching all these numbers and making them available there.
Great, thank you, Nicola. And maybe just take this opportunity to mention to Anne as well, who is interested in more information on LCOE, to also look at IRENA's Costing Alliance for further information on the data that we have available. So our next question is from Katerina, who is wondering if it's possible to create your own charts and also to extract this data and use it on your own. So several other people had asked about this as well. Stephanie, maybe you can answer.
As mentioned before, and I'll go back here, and I hope you can all see a resource again. You can go on the download button to basically extract your graph or chart for any research that you're doing, be it a PowerPoint or a paper, etc. But then when you come to actually creating your graph itself, let's say the most complex graphs that you can create are definitely the ones that are available in the capacity dashboard section. So for instance, we looked at the different tabs here on top before. So if you go, by instance, for comparison by country, and I think that was also one of the questions that we have, that we got, is you can select different countries and then make a comparison by country. Let's say Austria and Bosnia-Herzegovina. You can basically put these countries right next to each other and make a comparison how their renewable power capacity looks like. This can then, as I mentioned before, be downloaded as a graph, either in PDF or image, in whatever means you want to utilize then this chart or graph.
Wonderful, thanks, Stephanie. So our next question is coming from Andre and Hyojo, who are both wondering if there's any information available through resource on subsidies, feed-in tariffs, or any other policy instruments. Stephanie, maybe you can answer this as well.
Okay, so as mentioned before, when it comes to feed-in tariffs, subsidies, so these are all policy instruments used by different countries to promote the deployment of renewable energies. So IRENA, commonly with the IEA, is working on the joint policies and measures database, and each of the country profiles under the policy tab, you will be able to refer to that specific database itself, or if you even hover over a country on the map in the country profile page, you will see that in this case there's a direct link to the policies and measures database and the different policies and incentives the country has been putting in place.
Thank you, Stephanie. So our next question comes from Bettina, who is wondering if we have any information available on resource that differentiates by off-grid and grid-connected technologies, so maybe, and also especially within developing countries. So either Nicola or Stephanie?
So when it comes to off-grid, and that's quite a good question that you put forward here, off-grid data is data that is very hard yet to find, and also for IRENA we're working closely with national statistical offices to get a better understanding on off-grid data. This is something that we are looking into also for when it comes to a separate dashboard to see the evolution in specific countries, especially in let's say African countries and Latin American countries, to see how big is the part of off-grid versus grid connected. So that's something that we're working on in a moment.
Great, thank you. So our next question is coming from Jesper. Maybe Nicola, you can answer this one. He's wondering if there's any information on climate available within resource.
Information on climate is to be defined because it's a very vast topic. I don't think we can say that we have information that was collected yet specifically for the purpose of climate, although we may have reports that are mentioning that. But it's a good question in the sense that we were contacted to have some specific versions of resource adapted to specific topics. So we were already contacted to see if we could create a version of resource that could show the data that are relevant for islands, for example, complemented with information that could come from knowledge centers that are located or looking at the islands too, so that you can have one big repository for islands. And climate was also mentioned because the climate conference that is coming up in Paris, and can we provide a service where climate-related reports, for example, could be found in one single repository. So technically, this could be an adaptation of resource. We could foresee to have one big renewable energy repository that is out there today, which is the resource, and why not creating thematic versions more focused on a specific topic in partner with organizations that are collecting that on the topic. But it's not yet in place. It's in the plans for future developments.
Thank you, Nicola. So we have Matthias wondering about the data that's available for 2013, and I know Stephanie mentioned that the 2014 data is not complete as of yet. There is information for certain countries and technologies, but not for everything at the moment, but wondering if the 2013 data set is complete. We also have our colleague Olivier from our statistics team with us, and maybe he can answer on this one.
Thank you for the question. We are currently in the process of gathering all the data for 2014 that become available, and the plan is to publish them in a booklet format and to release them also in Excel, so that people will be able to download them from the IRENA platforms towards the second mid-June. That's the objective that we have.
Great, thank you very much, Olivier. So our next question is coming from Lemu, who's wondering how the country data is collected, and they're specifically interested in country data on Ethiopia. Stephanie?
Okay. As mentioned by Olivier in the last question, and I can go perhaps back on resource, and hopefully you can all see my screen. We can go on the 2014 dashboard itself. you will see that for Ethiopia we don't have data available yet, but for 2000 to 2013, if you basically select, for instance, the region of Africa and you go on the country of Ethiopia, you will see here that we have quite a comprehensive data set available for the country itself. As you can see, quite a large amount of hydropower followed by onshore wind and a little bit of geothermal. So when it comes to the sources and how we draw the information from, you will also see that below each graph, and this is what is changing dynamically depending on how you configure your graph and which selections you make, that here we have a based on, in this case, you will have the EIA, IRENA estimate, Aquameda, GWEC, and the International Geothermal Association.
Thank you. The next question is coming from Francisco, who's wondering, within the jobs data available on resource, if there's any information specifically on jobs gaps by country or by region. So Nicola can answer this.
So not as such. We have the active jobs into the sector. What we are starting to look is in education gaps instead. So basically what we can do is that we have an idea of the number of people working in the renewable energy sector right now, which amounts to 6.5, 6.7 million people working in the sector. With Remap, we are able to forecast that there would be 16 million additional people working in the renewable energy sector. And the question comes very quickly on where these people would come from. So with IRELP, with the learning initiative, we started making some simulations to see where people are being trained and what is the current status of educational capacities, at least per region, to have an idea. And what we see is very promising, but is very worrying at the same time. If the data that we have are accurate, which is not the case, we are improving our database all the time, and we are doing our best to get all the data, but it's difficult to capture all that. But if this data, what the data says is that there is a sort of gap of a factor 10 between the number of people that we would need to train every year to deliver 2030 scenarios, which is 900,000 to 1 million people per year, and the current educational capabilities that are able to provide any kind of curricula related, close or far, to renewable energy, which amounts to 65, 80,000 people, as far as we can count through our database. So this initiative on jobs and the remap scenario that help us to forecast or have an idea of the number of jobs that can be created, when you cross that to educational capabilities, it shows that there is something to do in renewable energy, definitely on education pretty quickly, because there would be, as it's the case in some regions already for some technologies, there would be an even greater shortage of people able to work in the sector, in particular in the new markets, and in particular in developing countries. So that's something we see coming.
Wonderful, thank you. So unfortunately, we're running short of time now, and I think we'll just take one more question. But we do have lots of questions coming in from the audience, so I just want to remind everyone that hasn't had their question answered during today's session that you can join us on the IRENA community, and we will circulate that link for you to join the discussion, and both our panelists will be available there to answer all of your questions and direct you on further use of resource. So the last question that we'll take is coming from Guy, who is wondering if you can provide more information on the methodologies and assumptions used to in gathering this data, and if these assumptions are made available on resource.
Thank you very much for your question, Guy. This is definitely one of the important questions also to address from our end. In the data section and data and statistics page itself, you have on the bottom right a methodology button, and if you click on the methodology, a PDF will open which will give you all the information that you need and how we make our assumptions related to the four different topical dashboards that you see in resource.
Great, thank you. And our apologies to everyone whose questions we didn't get to. Please do join us on the IRENA community. We will get back to all of you. So before we conclude today, we'd like to ask that you participate in a very, very short survey about today's webinar to help us in improving our webinar series. So you will see 3 questions pop up on your screen. You simply need to select your choice. Thank you very much for your feedback, and a big thank you to everyone that participated today, and a thank you to our panelists for sharing those excellent presentations. Before we close for today, we'd like to invite you to join us on social media. So you can follow us on Facebook, on Twitter, and you can find us on YouTube, where you'll see all of our archived webinars as well as the recording of this webinar. Of course, the IRENA community, where you can continue this discussion on resource and on LinkedIn. So thank you very much for joining us. I hope you all have a good day.